Know when the general election will be, but is this your last throw of the dice?
Absolutely not. We have produced today a budget that shows that we are turning a corner. We have had a plan since the time I became Chancellor to bring down inflation and restore growth. The numbers published and independently verified by the Office of Budget Responsibility show that plan is working. And what we are really saying when it comes to an election, whenever that is, and that's a decision for the Prime Minister, is that the fundamental choice is a Labour Party that thinks that you grow the economy by spending more, and a Conservative Party that thinks that the way to fire up the economy is actually to bring down the tax burden. And the changes that we've made today on national insurance, combined with what we did in the autumn, mean that we'll fill around 1 in 5 vacancies in the economy.
I will come back to the tax burden because the OBR forecasts show that it's going to be going to the highest level in 70 years by the end of the forecast. But I've got a whole section on that. What I want to ask you now, though, is should we expect another fiscal event before a general election, or is this it?
Well, that depends when the Prime Minister decides to call the election. But whenever that is, and that is the key point. You've just talked about the tax burden, so let me just address that point. Of course, taxes have gone up because we spent over £400 billion helping families through the pandemic and through a cost of living crisis. I think that was the right thing to do, but does that rise in taxation have to be permanent? No, and the big difference between Conservatives and Labour is that we believe the way we'll fire up the economy, create more jobs in the future, is by taking steps to bring down the tax burden, and that's what I did today.
Chancellor, will the tax burden, the share of GDP paid in tax, be going up or down over the next 5 years? Simple, and up or down?
Well, let me tell you, because of the decisions that I have taken as Chancellor, the tax burden will be over 0.5% of GDP less than it would have been. Are those taxes still higher than they were? Yes, they are. That's the answer to your question. The taxes are still higher because we spent a lot of money helping families with the furlough scheme, by the way, which saved 10 million jobs. That was the right thing to do. So I'm not pretending that taxes haven't had to go up. But what you see today, combined with the autumn statement a few months ago, is that we are making a decisive change in direction. Now the plan is working, inflation is coming down, growth is coming back. We're bringing down taxes on families because we know that's the way to create jobs in the economy, the way to make us a more prosperous country, the way to get more money for services like the NHS.
It's true that the curve is slightly coming down, but at the end of the Parliament, just so the viewers are clear, you're calling it a tax-cutting budget. By the end of the Parliament, taxes will be at the highest level, the tax burden, since 1948 in the Second World War. That's the highest level in 70 years. It's not a tax-cutting budget. Taxes are still going up.
No, Beth, because as we've just said, taxes were came up because of the pandemic and because of the cost of living crisis, and we thought it was right to support families. We've never pretended that taxes were doing anything other than going up to give that support. I think it was the right thing to do. We have very low unemployment because of that support. But now, because our plan is working, we're starting to bring taxes down. And that's what I did in the autumn statement, and that's what I've done this time.
OK, and I just want to put on the record that 7 million people are being dragged into higher tax bans. Fiscal drag is now raising 41.1 billion. That's twice the amount of your NI cut. So just for the viewers to be clear, you are cutting national insurance, but because of fiscal drag, people being pulled up into tax bans because you've frozen them, that's a lot more people paying more tax.
No, that is the wrong interpretation of the numbers. Because of what I have done today and in the autumn statement, someone on the average wage will be paying £1,800 less if there are 2 earners in the family. That is a big reduction in the tax that they would have paid. Now, I think what you're saying is, have taxes gone up to pay for the pandemic? I think we're sort of going over the same old ground, and yes, they have, and I don't pretend otherwise, but we are now bringing down the tax burden in a way that will make a big difference, particularly to families on lower incomes.
OK. Chancellor, is it important that Chancellors keep their promises?
Well, I think it's important that all politicians keep their promises.
OK. I ask you because the Prime Minister who used to be Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, told MPs and voters in March 2022 that I can confirm before the end of this Parliament in 2024, for the first time in 16 years, the basic rate of income tax will be cut from 20 to 19 pence in the pound. Simple question, does that promise still hold, yes or no?
Well, for someone who's working, he has cut the percentage of tax they pay, not by 1%, but by 4%.
I'm asking you a specific question.
I'm giving you a very
tax.
specific answer. For people who are working, he has cut the tax by 4%. That is and the reason we've chosen to do that, and not income tax, is because that is what's going to help to grow the economy. So that is the choice that we make. It is a very, very important choice.
So just to be clear, you as Chancellor now are saying to the public, in 2022, a Conservative government said we would cut basic rate of income tax in 2024 by 1 pence. You're now saying you're not going to do that.
Well, with respect, Beth, a lot of things have changed since 2022. I think the premise of what the Prime Minister was saying is if you stick to the plan, I will bring taxes down. And I think he has more than delivered that.
But you're not going to do income tax, just to be clear.
You've just heard the budget, Beth. We are taking 2 pence off national insurance. That follows a 2 pence cut off national insurance in the autumn. That is £900 back in the pockets of someone on the average salary. It's a very significant tax cut for those families.
And for your colleagues today, I spoke to Priti Patel yesterday, Lord Frost was on the television yesterday, Suella Braverman will be on the television talking to Sky News later today. They have been clamouring for for income tax cuts. I'm hearing loud and clear that this is not the direction, not the priority for you and Mr Sunak. What's your message to them when they're going to feel perhaps fed up with this budget? What's your message to them?
Well, I don't think they are going to feel fed up with this budget because it's the second fiscal event in a row where we have cut taxes decisively on ordinary families.
The polls don't move.
Well, hang on. I only delivered this an hour ago. It's the second one in a row where I have cut taxes decisively without increasing borrowing and protecting our public services. And that is, I think, what many of those people have been arguing for. And the reason is because we look around the world and we say that the economies that are really growing fast, that are making their people the most prosperous, are ones with lower taxes, because that makes it easier for businesses to expand. And that's what we're doing for the UK.
Chancellor, this is a pre-election budget. Many economists will say it's economically sound. Many politicians might say it's politically wanting. You cut national insurance by 2 pence in January. The polls are getting worse for the Conservatives. You're repeating it again. You are so far behind in the polls. You can understand why colleagues are feeling really anxious that you're not giving them more to sell on the doorstep.
Well, let me put it this way. I don't agree with that choice, the way you framed it, because I think the reason people vote Conservative is because they trust us with their family's money and they trust us with the economy. And yes, they want to see taxes come down, but they want it done in a responsible way. We've brought down taxes twice in a row now without increasing borrowing and protecting and investing in our public services like the NHS. That is a credible tax cut. It's a tax cut that's for real and forever. And that is because it's the right thing to do for the country.
Are you frustrated that the polls aren't moving then?
Well, I think in the end, the polls that happen in a very difficult period for the country, when inflation at points has been over 11%, when we've had a pandemic and a war in Ukraine, those polls are very different to what happens in an election. In an election, people say, when you faced all those difficulties, did this government do the right thing for the long-term future of the country? And this was a long-term budget for growth.
As Chancellor, your time could be running out in number 11. It seems to me you're planning for an autumn election now. The Prime Minister's indicated it. You presumably are looking at energy bills falling, interest rates falling potentially over the summer, and even maybe another fiscal event. Is that the plan?
That's the working assumption, but in the end, it's a choice the Prime Minister makes.
And just finally, I was down in your constituency this week. You've put £100,000 of your own money into your constituency. Why is that? Is that because people aren't investing in your local or giving money to the Conservatives, or is it that you're so worried about losing your seat to the Lib Dems that you're having to bankroll your own association and therefore campaign?
I put that money in mainly because during the pandemic it was not possible to do fundraising in the normal way. I've got a brilliant team in my constituency and we do some fantastic local campaigning and I wanted that to continue despite the fact that we couldn't fundraise. But have I got a tough fight against the Lib Dems? Absolutely, and I've never taken that for granted.
And what do you say to people that would say it's unfair that just because you're a wealthy individual that you can kind of bankroll your own association when others can't afford to do that?
Well, look, this shows that I am committed to the local area. It's a free country. All these donations are disclosed. You're asking that to me now. And, you know, that is because I want to carry on serving the people of Godalming and Ash.
Thank you so much.